Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Life After Work podcast. Some reflections and even ramblings on a variety of topics from the perspective of early retirement, brought to you by Radio Alti and Altrincham Community Media. As usual, we have Rod Maxwell, Radio Alti DJ and former management consultant, having retired early following a brain tumour. The Sir Alex Ferguson of our group, being our organiser, motivator and the guy who made it all happen. Also, Ash Sharma, a former dentist who retired early due to a finger injury, making him the Gary Lineker of our group. We have Paul Davies, P.A. Davies, former GMP police officer and now published author, writer and poet. The Georgios Karagounis of the group, residing now in Greece, bringing some much needed creativity to our team, to say nothing of the excessive dribbling. And finally, me, Phil Harrison, retired from a varied career in commercial insurance, who due to my versatility and reliability used to describe myself as the Phil Neville of insurance, until someone said, "What, you mean you're rubbish?" So I don't say that anymore. Anyway, today's topic is technology, the past, the present and the future. That's the topic of our ramblings today. And who wants to kick us off with that? Paul, I think you were buzzing, as you said, to comment on this.
Yes, I was. You see, this excites me. We're all of that age where we remember the good old toys and computers the stuff of the 70s. I'm totally fascinated how we have gone from, in such a relatively short space of time, from playing your 78s or your 45s on a lift-up record. A record player, people, that's the thing with a needle that spins around on a record and comes out speakers, to actually putting all your music collection on your phone, in an app on your phone. Thousands upon thousands of tunes are on the phone. And the development of technology, we go from our first computer game, and I think we mentioned this briefly a couple of weeks ago, was the fact that you could upload onto your TV in black and white like a tennis game. And all it was two white bars and a white blip in the middle. And he used to go beep, 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 beep. And that was it. And you were hooked on this game of tennis. And if you got the updated version, you could actually play squash, which was just one bat and a ball. Now, I sort of explained to my daughter what it was like, and she was like, "How did you ever survive?" And what I'd like to sort of ask and throw out there is how I personally think nowadays kids have got it a lot easier with technology. They've got it so easy, things are at the fingertips. But do they realise perhaps the value of such gadgets? Are they too free and readily available? Because when we got a gadget as kids, it was like, oh my God, I'm James Bond, and you played with that particular gadget forever or until it broke. Today, we're in a throwaway age where kids will get a phone, they'll smash the phone, they'll get another phone. So there's no realization of how technology has gone from where we were in the late 60s and 70s up until present day, where kids have got mobile phones.
No, Paul, I think you're absolutely right, because at the end of the day, if you're looking at technology itself, to have a position of appreciating technology, you've got to accept the fact that, or have a position where you never had it in the first place, like we us four have had. We've never had, we didn't have computers or mobile phones at that time. I mean, really, and last year I was actually finishing my papers off. I had to do a master's and I finished that off. And it was so much easier when I did it last year because I had Google Scholar and you could access it. Virtually all the information was there by my keyboard. When I qualified in '92, and we had to do essays and things like that, it's microfilm. I'm not kidding you. You had to go to the library. You had to be there for days on end, writing things down in a book and then making a list and then and then if you were lucky, they let you on a word processor or a Macintosh. I don't know if you remember those gigantic screens. Yeah, so there were no laptops at home, were they? So you could carry on. You had to book in and you had to order papers and that sort of thing. So I think nowadays there's less appreciation of tech because they've not been without it, never not had it. I suppose they'll get it if they lose it or don't have their phone, or God forbid if their mobile phone. Where's my phone? When am I getting it? The battery's not. If something goes wrong with the phone, then you'll start hearing about the fact that they'll miss it. But I think. I don't think they get it at the moment. It's always been there. It's a comfort blanket.
Well, that's true. I agree with the points you're both making, but equally, I would say, it was ever thus. Each generation just takes for granted, in a way, and is entitled to take for granted the technology that exists in their era. Our parents would have done exactly the same thing.
True. Yeah.
They'd have taken for granted maybe the car. Depends which era you're in. Or do you go back and say, do farmers really appreciate their tractors because before that generations used the horse? I think it just is what it is. Yes, it moves incredibly quickly these days, but equally, I think it's so hard not to. We've all guilty of it, very quickly taking for granted what's there. And I just call it adapting to what the circumstances are.
Do you not think though, Phil, that we have seen? Yes, we did take for granted a lot of the things when we were kids. But don't you think we were sort of born and grew up in an era where the change, if you like, from old-fashioned to technology and the digital age was very, very quick? It was, you might have got your tractor, and you might have got a little bit of a better tractor. But we've gone from, like I say, playing records or little computer games and only seeing flip phones on Star Trek. And even
absolutely. I agree. The pace is phenomenal, and I'm equally as excited and astonished by it as you. And when you think, as you say, that we had records, as did our parents and our grandparents. But when you think, we've quickly rattled through tape cassettes, CDs. Have I missed one along the way there? Video discs.
Oh yeah,
the final sort of virtual computer file technology of music that has arrived. Whether it's the ultimate, who knows? Things keep moving. But yeah, I agree with you entirely. The pace has just been phenomenal.
I think the thing about it is the immediacy of everything. Like, for example, if I wanted to find, if I wanted to say, right, do you know what? I want to try and read Paul's latest book or latest poem. I just get my phone, go into Audible or go into Amazon. I can order it. It'll be there tomorrow. If I wanted to listen to, if Rod said, right, this podcast is going to be out or some music coming out, and I could go into my Spotify and any obscure song, I press it and it's there. There's no queuing up. There's no CD, nothing.
But there is something about that immediacy thing for me, because if you go back to, I remember buying my first record in the 1970s, and I'm sure like you guys, it was a single, and I think one of my first ones was something like Status Quo, What You're Proposing, right? So probably about 1979, and you would go and you would put it on, or if you bought an album, you would put it on and you would listen to the whole thing back to back, and you would properly consume it and engross it, if you like.
Yeah.
And because you didn't have many purchases like that, and you had to go and get that, so getting that was a big thing. And the thing about now is that in all aspects of our lives, people are consuming faster, but not actually digesting that, if you like. It's just consumption. And you can get that much stuff now for free or information. It's just changed the relationship, I think. But I find it astonishing when you look at the size. If you went back to a house in the 1970s, the size of the TV, you would have a video machine there. Even the phone would be massive. The hi-fi was, something that was in a wooden box with a smoked glass thing with big speakers. Everything was absolutely small. And if you think all those things now, if you put them all in a room, your mobile phone is doing nearly all those things now at the size of your hand. That's an incredible rate of change. And I think we were talking off air that when was it the first man went in the moon? Was it 68? Was it
69?
69. I think we were saying now that the computing power that NASA had to take Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin to the moon is, I think, roughly equivalent to what you have in your pocket in your phone today. That is just incredible, you know. So in a small time, if you think of how long it took to go from, say, fire and the Iron Age and all the way through different ages, the digital age has just gone boom. It's mad.
Yeah.
I think we actually forget. I'd love to be able to be transported back into the office or the house. But I'm thinking about the office at the moment that you first worked in, and just look at the work practices. And you actually forget that there wasn't a computer. And I do remember your daily work arriving in an in tray. And the pace must have been snail pace, because you knew if you were dealing with an issue, yes, you could phone people up, but everything generally had to be committed to writing for record purposes. And so you knew if you had to write to somebody, it would be days before the response would come. So issues would take weeks to progress.
I remember that. I mean, you're right. I mean, because I remember in 1992 when I qualified, and we had good old-fashioned record cards. So I mean, looking back on it now, it's actually amazing. So you got a little card the size of an A4 sheet, basically, and you'd fill in all the patient details, the charting, medical history, and all the rest of it, and you had to get it all on there. And you know, you couldn't. There's no musings or anything like that. You could. It's just straight in there. And now you're looking at all the records are based on a computer hard drive, so you can cross-reference lots of things. So if you wanted to check up, for example, you know, right, how many crowns have I fitted last year? Then it would come up. It would work it all out for you. How many of them had to be done again? It would come up. So you get metrics, so you can analyze things like that. So in terms of the workplace, analysis for our working habits has just gone through the roof. And some may say that's not as good because you can overanalyze things. But in terms of improving performance, improving the way you do things, you know, working practice, technology has massively improved us, hasn't it?
Well, I remember going to one of my first projects about 93, 94, and down at, it would have been, first one would have been down at Eagle Star in Cheltenham, and the staff didn't have laptops, and we were a consulting firm, and only our managers, and only some of the managers had, and senior managers had a laptop, and the laptop had to be connected to the phone line to dial in using a modem to download their emails. And they would do this maybe once a day or once a week. And you know, I remember being a young associate and being told to go under the desk to plug it in for somebody so they could connect to the phone line. And you might as well have been there with something that you wound up. You know, it was so slow. And you know, this is and that was only 93, 94, and we were working on big mainframe systems, putting in systems that could deal with 16 million customers or whatever for Barclaycard. So it was just, everything was bulky and big, you know, but that's only what, 20 odd years, 30 years ago.
I remember my on-call phone when I first qualified. I used to get the short end of the wedge, basically. And they said, oh, right, give it to Ash, give it to Sharma. He's been on, he can do the on-call. So I used to do on-call. And I'm telling you, the phone used to be like a brick, but the battery had its own case. It had to be, you had to put that in the boot, and you have to walk around. So if you wanted to go to town sometimes, like you said, oh gosh, you have to carry this monstrosity around with you. Honestly, it's just, and that's just, you know, what, 20 years ago, 25 years ago?
Well, I remember 1985, 86, I was working for a builder. I was only 16 years of age. And he used to have a Motorola with what was about the size of a car battery. And we used to have to, he used to put himself in the bucket of the digger and have to get lifted up so he could make a call to get a signal to order some wood for the building site, you know. And it was heavy, it was monstrosity of a thing, you know.
You don't know how lucky you were, though. Before, in my early days, I was out on the road as a salesperson in the wilds of North Yorkshire. And there was, because of health and safety concerns, it was a rule they introduced that you had to ring back to the office at least once a day, and because they didn't know towards the end of the day. This was before mobile phones, so I literally had to find a phone box to ring back to the office. And I think this is just the basics that we forget of how it's absolutely transformed the little elements of working life and life generally.
Yeah.
Just one other thing as well. When this was late 80s, but I do remember being wildly impressed as a friend of a friend, just as a first job, was a facsimile salesperson. And I asked what it was. Wow, what's that?
Yeah.
You can send paper over a phone line. How does that work? That's really cool.
The wonders of modern technology.
Yeah.
And now
Some
it's a
things don't last,
curse.
though, do they? Some things
It's
don't.
a curse now. It was a curse now. You get all these junk facts. Do you remember? You get the equivalent of junk email. Oh God.
Yeah, exactly. What amazes me though, you run about the before, Rod, the old houses with the old TVs, the old gramophones. When did we start? I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing, but when your mum and dad got a TV, it's normally from Radio Rentals.
Yes.
You couldn't buy one. It was one you had to rent.
Yeah.
And if you did buy a TV, you know that TV would last forever and ever until one of the valves eventually went. But they were big, but they were built to last.
Yeah.
When have we come into this throwaway age where you buy a computer, you can get a laptop now for under £200, and if it breaks, I'll get another one. When do we go into that? And when did things start getting? They're getting quicker and more intricate and more intelligent, but in my mind, they're getting a little bit flimsy. So
I think that's a good point.
You're right. You think you're right, Paul, but it's sort of the result of the fact that things do move so quickly. What's the point in building something with the physical durability to last 10 years when the actual technology will be dated after 2 years? I think which is why, in turn, it's become really important that we're able to recycle these things and not just keep throwing away at the speed we do. Yes, things need to be renewed and moved on, but we just can't dispose of the way we have been doing.
I agree. I don't think there is actually any competitive advantage of building something that's actually made to last anymore. It's about that moment, and it's about the rate of change. I mean, if you think of how many mobile phones, I've got a load behind me actually at the moment, but you think of many mobile phones you've gone through in the last 10 years. And it's all because the physical phone might not change that much. It's all about the amount of data and the speed at which it actually can go.
Well, manufacturers, they actually call it, Rod, they call it built-in obsolescence. They actually have it, don't they? Whereby it's designed to actually not work. I mean, for example, Apple might say, we're not going to have any updates for this phone after this level. So you're forced to actually move on, aren't you? You're forced to pass on, but not like the other day, like with televisions. At the end, you do have that for 5, 7, 10 years or so, wouldn't you? Television like that.
I've heard
TV, we had it for ages.
I can't name the company because it'd be slanderous, but I've heard a rumor that there is a technology company that effectively has a kill switch in its technology that it can just your machine will break at a certain point in time.
Wouldn't surprise me.
It's so that it can then sell more.
I've heard that before, and that's a little spooky, which brings me on to the part where I was sort of saving this for the end bit, but I'm going to bring it in now. In terms of technology and the fact that we're on Zoom, we're talking to each other, we can see each other, though we're thousands of miles apart, some of us, we can talk to each other on the phone, you can video, you can order something. What's your theories on how are we being watched? Are we being listened to? Now, we had this conversation off air, I think it was last week, but I'm going to put it in there. I'm going to put it on air and make it official because this has happened to me. I've been probably thinking out loud or saying to Jane, do you know what? We should get, I don't know, a new camera. Suddenly, from that evening or the day after, my Facebook adverts are full of adverts for cameras or whatever I've been talking about. Is somebody listening? What's going on there? I'm not sure.
Well, I agree with you, Paul, because I mean I had the same thing. I wanted to learn to play the guitar, so I was talking to you guys before. I don't know, probably off air, and suddenly I got adverts, like plectrums and guitar chord charts and things like this. You never searched anything, so it's really, I don't know. It's a bit odd, isn't it?
Well, I think in a way, with technology, you've always given away some degree of privacy, if you like. So, if you go back to the early days of having a smart card or a loyalty card for a shop, essentially what they're getting is a bunch of demographic data about you, and they're also being able to track your buying history, so they could be smarter about the offer they give you and how much they order and everything about that, right? So ultimately, it's you think you're getting something from it, but actually the retailer is getting more, right? And I think in some ways today it's possibly the same with a smart speaker in your house. You think you're getting a load of content for free, right? And that's the thing. But it's not actually for free. There's a quid pro quo that's not written anywhere. It's not said anywhere. But the quid pro quo is you're giving away a ton of data that they use and they get economic value from. And that's what Google is, essentially. It is a data factory, And
well, the only difference there, though, Rod, when shopping, there's a tacit understanding between the customer saying that, if I have your card and this, that, and the other, you're welcome to do this. Well, you don't expect a device which ostensibly is off to be eavesdropping on what you're saying. That's the only thing.
Though, is it?
Well, that's what I'm saying. So if I've got my phone and it's off, I've just put it to one side. It's not. It shouldn't be listening to what I'm doing and giving me suggestions. If there was an understanding saying that if you use our phone, blah blah blah, then it may, how many people would use their phone if it said we will listen in on everything you're saying?
I agree with you to an extent. I'm playing devil's advocate, but equally, sure, it's in those terms and conditions that none of us ever read and scroll through. And when you, by clicking on the button to access it, you have accepted those terms and conditions.
Exactly. It'd be interesting to see
Google
if there is.
Assistant or one of the equivalents.
So
now just speak to your phone and it will answer, so it's on and it's listening.
But you see, I think this is where the future of this is, that the consumer, us as people, need to take back a little bit of control. And I personally believe that there's a role in the future for you to be able to go to an organization and say, you're going to be my data bank, okay? And all this data that is collected, that is happening behind the scenes, is I want you will store that for me, and I will decide how it's used. And so it could be, for example, you might decide to give away some of your data to some health research. Okay, and that might be data simply as much as how many steps a day you take, your weight, and maybe the type of things that you eat. That could be used as for health research reasons. There may be data that you sell to an organization, like your consumer habits, that they therefore use, and that helps them develop goods or services or whatever. But I think the future around this is that actually the consumer. There might be organizations that allow you to take back some control, because at the moment, the likes of Google and Amazon and Apple are essentially data factories, and they are making loads of money off your data. They're selling your data to organizations. And I think maybe the future of this is going to be organizations that allow you to take some control over it and you to be able to harvest some economic value from it. That's one picture of the future I believe is going to happen.
I think they should definitely swing towards that, because, like we said before off air, and we've said many a times, yes, we're thankful that we get the £10 off your Tesco shop, or you get a 5% discount here and there, but that's because they're using the data, your data, that they've collected, and go, oh, you know what, Rod Maxwell likes baked beans, so what we're going to do, we're going to give him 10% off his next order of baked beans. They've used your data to establish that. But while they're offering you baked beans, they've noticed that you like a certain pair of shoe, so they're selling your data to a shoe person, saying Rod Maxwell likes these, so that they're sending you adverts, and you go, well, I do need a pair of shoes, and suddenly you've got two companies making money off your data, who then pass it on to somebody else because he's been looking at particular types of headphones. Well, we sell headphones, so we need to be able to. That is a splendid idea where we say, this is my data, I want to use it to my advantage and my choosing, because it's my data. And what worries me about things like that, we should be able to do that, but I don't know if any of you guys have got an iPhone, but you go onto some of the apps on the iPhone now, and a tiny little green light will come up at the top there. That means they're listening to you, or they have access to your camera.
But the point, I guess the point for me is you can go and store data on a Google Drive and get that for pretty much nothing, right? So you can store a certain amount of data on a Google Drive for nothing. Now that doesn't come free because they've got to have servers, they're set up somewhere, etc. So the point for me, the thing is that there's no contract. It's a very subconscious, unwritten, informal contract, and you're obviously giving away something for that free service. You know, the fact that you can Google something, you're giving away the fact that you're doing that, and it's leaving a footprint. And I do think that if you think about it too much, you might actually be a bit like I'm trying to think of the movie where the guy locked himself away in a room that was all foil and everything like that. I forget, there was a movie. It was, oh goodness. And he was worried about everybody being able to listen to him and everything else. You could take this to the nth degree, but see, I personally think, I think that if you look at the history, then you can actually predict how this could go in the future. And so I look at retailers and think they've been very scientific and quite advanced in terms of how they've used data. Banks have been the same. Airlines have been the same in terms of, airlines have been the way that they do their ticketing, and they look at the demand and supply, and they adjust the prices, and they do that type of automatic rebalancing of prices to track demand. I think actually when it comes to health, we are so behind the curve in the use of information in health that's where the big advantage has to come. And as I said to you, for me, I can't believe that a GP today has to rely so much on their senses when you sit in front of them and they know nothing about what you're about to present. Whereas if you go step inside a supermarket, they probably know more about you, your demographic information, what you last bought, than a GP does, and you're talking about health. And
you're right, Rod. Yeah.
It's
amazing how the basic technology used around the process is so at odds in health with the incredible use of technology within the areas of such as surgery. When you think what you can do, sending little things in veins and arteries inside your body, all sorts of things. And yet, as you say, just the mere mechanics of how the health service works, we don't seem to be capitalizing as much as I'm sure we could.
And the whole economics of health are all wrong, because it's all geared up to actually treat people when they become ill. Whereas, it's a bit like servicing a car. You're far better being preventative than actually being reactionary. So, I think that we can use everyday information to potentially keep people healthy rather than treating them when they're ill. So, if you take, I don't know, you take, and this is where I think the future is going to go. I think that if you take a car, when you sit on a car, that seat could be weighing your body every day, right? And it could be storing that information. And when you put your hands on the steering wheel, that could be taking your pulse. And when you put your foot on the brake, that could be getting your reaction time. There's three basic pieces of information that possibly could help with things like Alzheimer's, or could be even just your basic weight. And so actually early identification of that, and a GP having what I would call smart health capability, where they can pull you in and say, you know what, we've seen something in your data map that tells us that we're worried about you. Okay, your number of steps have come down, and your pulse is going up. We want to get you in for a health check. You do it for your car. They do it for the car these days. We've got to get there with health. So for me, the future of health, to get to, and this is the point, is to help people stay healthy, but actually it's to reduce the cost of health in this country, because we can't afford the bill anymore,
Wouldn't that be a good use of data then? Why do you think that doesn't happen now, Rod? Do you think it's the NHS not being proactive?
Well, can I just say that if you're looking at the dentistry, dentistry is generally, for example, the practice that I was at, we were very, very preventative. We tried to establish a 6 monthly checkup protocols. We used to do the checkup. People, patients would just come in, and then you spot things very early. You'd spot signs of gum disease very, very early on, and that could preempt tooth loss later on as well. If you saw a crack in a tooth, that could preempt a fracture in that crown and toothache, and so you could save the tooth. So prevention is a main part of dentistry. I think they do that. There are other sides of dentistry, which is people come in with toothache. That's reactionary. You have to deal with those sort of things. But once you've got an established list, I was much more preventative about it. And so you're absolutely right. Prevention is the way to go, because it stops. I mean, no one wants to be ill. No one wants to have pain. No one wants to have a loss of function, either dentally or through your body. You don't want to do that. So if there's an easy way of actually being preventative by analyzing information, it's got to be the way forward. But I think
Ash, don't you think more could be done with data in that respect?
It is. I think it's setting it up, isn't it? Rod, you're probably going to know, but it's harder to set up those data points, isn't it? I mean, and who would analyze it? How would
the big challenge when I used to discuss this back in practice, quite interesting because all these memories are coming back now. But I used to discuss, I came from a consumerism point of view. I came into consulting in health, not having had any health background, but actually doing retail consulting. And what I didn't appreciate was all the challenges around privacy and the storage of that information and the access of the information. Because could you imagine if that information got into the hands of an insurance company, and Phil, you used to come to that sector, where suddenly they were taking a predictive view of your health, and your premiums were dynamically changing because of that. Yeah. So the problem with this is that data security is really, really important, and the governance around that and how it's used is really, really important. And I don't think we're set up, and we're not set up and mature enough in how that could go. But I see that as being the future technology, personally speaking.
Yeah.
I had exercise bike. It was a cheap exercise bike. I think it cost 40 quid. So you know how cheap it is. On that exercise bike, it had a computer worked by an AA battery. That told me my pulse, my blood pressure, how many miles had gone, how many calories had burned. So if we can fix that to a cheap bike, I'm sure, like your suggestion, Rod, it wouldn't take car manufacturers any great amount of detail into their car to have the sense, because this had sensors on the handlebars. It was just metal sensors, so it knew what I was doing. If you have that built into a steering wheel and on your seats, they can do so much with the car, and that could collect data, and you would be able to perhaps go and have it downloaded in wherever, and you could use that data. And that could be, I'm not saying how it could happen, I'm saying it wouldn't be hard for a techie to sort out the actual metrics of it to get it up and going. But yeah, like I think Ash said, Phil said, we do it for everything else. We use that data for everything else. Why is it so hard, or why has no one switched on to the fact that we should really do it for health?
But I think the problem is that for in a lot of these areas, you have a single company that is the innovator or the one that breaks the norms, and the problem with health is we're not in a private health or system, so if I have no doubt if the government were to split the country up into health zones and actually get private companies in to run health, one of the first areas they would focus on is preventative health rather than reactionary. And they would probably spend more money trying to keep the country healthy, because that actually reduces the cost of health, therefore increases their profits. And we don't incentivize people to get healthy or stay healthy, because they're so used to us being there for when they need, they're unhealthy. Now, there's a lot of people can't help that. If you take my situation, I don't think there was anything that would have prevented my brain tumor, really, and I didn't really know something was going wrong until it was probably too late. But there are other forms of health issues that potentially you can through lifestyle, etc. You can treat differently. So
Rod, I totally agree with that, because the thing is, I think I'm more of a cynic. Now, if you look at pharmaceutical companies, I think the vast majority of their profits will come from the actual palliative care or maintenance of that illness. So I know this is going to sound really awful, but it's far more bucks in it for them to look after a diabetic type 2 patient than it is to cure them.
Exactly.
So what they need, so they're not massively that bothered about prevention, I don't think. I think, again, looking at corporate pharmaceutical companies, they're just basically going to be looking at the major diseases, which are the ones which cause the most gain the most money, and that's what they're going to do, and that's where they make the most money. You don't get any blockbusters anymore, really. A blockbuster in the sense that it will cure something. It's always a drug that's going to alleviate cardiovascular symptoms, alleviate diabetes, alleviate this, alleviate. It's not to cure. It's not to.
But I used to get this challenge. I used to get this challenge, Ash, and people used to say to me, "You're never going to change it because that's the way the system is, right?"
Yeah.
But what if actually those drug companies actually owned a therapeutic area in the country? So if you turn around to one of the companies, you say, "You're going to be responsible for the therapeutic area of heart disease, and actually we're going to pay you so much, okay?" And to run that, I bet you they would start to think preventatively, because they would want less people in the system to make more money rather than just push drugs. And the problem is we're getting into health, but I think that the way we look at it needs to change. It's not about just treating an outcome. I think technology could be used to predict some outcomes and get in early intervention. Especially around health, for example. That would be my view. But that the problem with that is, and the problem with health is, it's such a personal thing, and that information could be misused really badly and cost people something. That's the problem you've got to break, basically. Whereas if you go shopping and buy, a food item, a phone, or whatever, nobody cares about that. But if they can see that you're becoming unwell, an insurance company or some other organization can change your premiums, and that becomes a data confidential issue.
Well, the way around that would be, personal tech. I think some of you might have iPhone watches. I don't have iPhone, but iPhone watches or smartphone watches, and a lot of them within them have heart rate, in-depth heart rate. So I'm not just talking about a pulse rate. We're looking at the work. Yeah, so they work out systolic, diastolic pressures. They work out your time for recovery and all that sort of thing. And then you'll get weighing machines which do fat analysis. So on a personal level, you could do that for yourself. And so in the mornings, you could look at your heart rate, look at your fat, and this, that, and the other. So within our take personal responsibility with the tech that's available, you could actually do that. And that would give you an idea. Suddenly you might think, oh my God, my heart rate's 180, my fat's gone. And you think, it would bring it to your attention. So I think, if we start taking responsibility for our own health as well, and tech can help with that, I think it definitely can.
Harking back to one of our previous exercises about resolutions, I'm now going to make a resolution. So next time I visit the doctor, I'm going to mention this and offer to say, look, I have all this data because I do wear a Garmin smartwatch that takes a lot of that data. I'm going to ask if it would be useful for them to know that.
That's a good idea.
Well, I actually think GPs of the future should have essentially like research labs, data research people that work behind the scenes. And if they know a patient's coming in, they can actually give that GP some insight about that person before they get in. and telling some
more efficient.
I think it would help. And actually, I think what you would get is a more holistic approach to health, rather than that person coming in and talking about the one thing they notice is wrong with them. Yeah, it's a bit like, bringing the car in and running a diagnostic on the car and knowing, well, actually, I came in for an exhaust, but there's something dodgy about something else. You actually know more information about your car's health than you do about your own health. It's mad.
I think it'd be good that if you do follow up with that, Phil, because can you imagine if there was some sort of chip and pin feature in a doctor? Well, then, hi Phil, how are you? Just scan your watch on there for me. You go like that with your watch, and it downloads all the data and says,
brilliant.
That would be brilliant.
Brilliant idea, that, Paul. That would be so good, wouldn't it? Can you imagine while you're waiting, logging in, and then just put your watch on the thing? Fantastic. So that would tell you the whole profile of that'd be excellent.
But I think I call that predictive health, if you like. But basically, it's joining the dots because these dots, these data patterns, all add up together to something, And I look at my behavior sort of 3-4 months before I discovered I had a brain tumor, but I don't know how that would have worked in that case. But there's more simplistic measures like pulse, like weight, like reaction speeds, or whatever, and those are all things that could be easily measured, But I mean, that's only, I think we focus very much on health, but I think in this country our health is hugely important, of course, but it's a big bill to this country, and we can't afford the bill anymore. That's the problem.
I mean, the biggest thing, Rod, is going back to the fact, the simple thing is with GPs and general medicine as a whole, is they don't do checkups. You only turn up if you've got a cold or if you're not well. So something has got to be ailing you before you go. That's the model is all wrong. It's very reactionary. They're going back to dentistry again. We did, twice yearly checkups. So you picked up on that. Is anything wrong? Oh yeah, I've noticed I've got a lump on my cheek here, or I've noticed this white patch on my tongue. Is that anything? So they didn't have to wait, or you'd see it first. The number of, thank God I've seen white patches that you then refer, then have them biopsied. And it was, it saved the day. You saw oral cancers and they were preempted, and you saw them and you dealt with them. But if you look at it with doctors, people, who actually goes to have you guys ever been to your doctor for a checkup, just a normal checkup?
Yeah, I have to say I'm not saying this is all surgeries, but my surgery back home, Parkview surgery, that they, talking about chip and pin watches, they would be the first to implement them and get them. They are so forward thinking. It's great.
Well, that's the exception to the rule, though, isn't it? Generally speaking,
very much so.
Hopefully, we're almost at this point where health will take this up, because it's definitely been taken up by fitness. So maybe health is the next area it goes. Obviously, closely related, but it's
well, they go hand in hand, don't they? They do go hand in hand.
Revolutionised. There's no doubt technology has revolutionised.
I personally think that actually you should be able to have your health record on your phone, right? And if you look at what we've been going through in this last year, maybe actually to be able to get anywhere, you're going to have to prove, whether you've had a COVID test or whatever. I actually think that, when you think you're in a car accident, right? At the moment, there's nothing that would tell a paramedic what blood type you are, whether you're, maybe if you held a card or you're diabetic or something. But can you imagine if they could go onto your phone and there was some sort of break glass type thing, and it brought up basic information about you that might help that paramedic?
Yeah, there's an app now that does it.
Is there?
It's on Apple. I can't remember what it's called, but basically on a lock screen, you can tap it and it brings up all your blood types, your next of kin details, your doctor's details. So it's very good. I can't remember what it's at. There's only a couple of apps that do it, but it works on a lock screen, so you don't have to be holding it against the person who's convulsing and try and get him to ID it on his face. So that's very good. But just going back to what you said about having your medical records on the phone, I've got mine on my phone. Parkview have an app, yeah, and I've right back for many, many years. And they've got all my medical records on my phone. It's really, that's what I mean about them. They're very forward thinking.
I didn't know that system.
Yeah, it's really, really good. They've many a time called me in. You came to see us 6 months ago on such and such an issue. We'd like to see you again. Come in, make sure you go and see the nurse. She'll take your blood pressure, check your bloods, all this business. Make sure you're all right. So they really are, and like you said, that they are probably an exception to the rule.
Paul,
you know,
what we should have now with the technology available is, and they were introducing this in the commercial world a long time ago, the idea of a standard office where it didn't matter. Now it's probably from home anyway, but the idea, you walk into any office of a company anywhere in the world and it's the same, and it uses all cloud-based, so you're not relying on anything restricted to physically that office. It's just a location, which is probably why it can be from home now. And I don't see why it shouldn't be the same with doctor surgeries, that with cloud-based data information, you should be able to walk into any surgery, and the data that Rod was talking about earlier, that should be accessible wherever you are in the country.
Yeah. It's just that we have different systems. We had that with the computer system we used in our dental practice was different to the one down the road. So as you were saying there, Phil, there's just no uniformity because it's too fragmented. With the NHS, maybe you could have done it. And even then, within regions, you get health authorities will have contracts with different data companies, with different software companies. So it's so fragmented, it's really hard to put it together. There's just so many heads within that beast, basically.
Yeah, and I can imagine why dentistry's got a bigger private element, I would imagine. But it is. Mine was a private practice, so yeah, you're right. But at the end of the day, this is bigger private practice. You could run it in the way you want to run it, because you're not answering to anyone.
If we go back to the point somebody was making about, are these Alexa, Google devices listening to us? I mean, it's a bit like Blake 7. I think it was Blake 7.
I love that program.
Yeah, well, I think in the future, when you design a new home, you'll design it with the technology at the heart of it. And that you will go in and you'll say to the home computer, can you switch on the lights in this area? Can you set the cooker on to whatever it is? Essentially, you will have some sort of home supercomputer that
Rod, I'm not sure we're that far away from it.
No, we're not.
It's already happening in.
Well, I remember that brings me. I mean, I was going to say as the story there. I mean, an Asimov story where this guy, the beds almost sentient, so it works out how much you're sleeping, how much you move. When you go to the toilet, it analyzes your wee, it analyzes your stools and everything, and then as you walk through things, your blood pressures, this, that, and the other. So that's probably, I guess, is that the future you're aiming for?
I don't know if I'm aiming for it, but I can see it coming down the line. I mean, I remember going to a smart home when I used to work for Anderson Consulting. We had a place in Windsor, and it was called Smart Home, and it was a view as to what the house could be like. And for example, the bin would have a sensor that would pick up the barcode of what you chucked out, and then it would put that as an automatic thing on your shopping list, because that would have been an item maybe that you would typically have, so that your shopping list automatically replenished, if you like, based on that. And that was just one example of a smart home. So I quite like some of that stuff, because I
think it's great.
It could be labor saving. I think personally, the future of technology is going to have health at its core, and I think it's got to be environmentally helpful. So it's got to reduce waste. And whether it be water efficiency, food efficiency, like the smart fridge that can tell you what's going off. Yeah. And therefore, to use that. I think those are the things that will ultimately.
Well, you don't want it to be too judgy, though. The last thing you want is a judgy fridge. Can you imagine you pop in there and you take out a donut and go, Ash, having another one. You only had one yesterday. And you have another beer, another bottle of wine.
But if you think about it, Ash, your phone's already telling you, or your computer's telling you many hours you spent on it per day. So
yeah, but come on, you're going to being told off by your appliances. That's going. I draw the line at the misses, but God.
Maybe that's the future of health. We won't need doctors. We'll just need judgy fridges.
Well, can you imagine that the house has a supercomputer that's got a voice and it speaks to you? I mean, what voice would you want speaking to you? Who would it be? You know?
Oh,
Jessica Rabbit. Did that come out loud?
We're going down another rabbit hole here.
Yeah. So we can see that definitely text has got potential to improve our lives then, hasn't it? Specifically on health, that's for sure.
But even if you look at this pandemic and the way in which like the broadcasting, the TV companies have taken and used, for example, iPhones. I mean, I think there's some of these made a film on the latest iPhone. You know, you can make good quality films using an iPhone, and you know, the way the BBC and other outlets have allowed their people to work at home and do interviews from home, etc. And that's been possible because of the era that we lived in, you know. But they've accepted a slightly different quality because of the convenience and the need, really, you know.
Yeah.
When do you think, how many generations on, do you think the parents will be saying to the children, we used to wash clothes in a washing machine. What's a washing machine? It was a thing you put your clothes in and we used to wash them. And we cooked food in a microwave. What's a microwave? It was like this box that you used to put food in and cook. Because we've gone back on. I say to my daughter, God, when I was young, well, not her age because she's 21 now. When I was young, we had a television with 3 channels with a push button. VHS was the big thing, where you remote control. You couldn't control it from your armchair by anything other than a 3-foot wire that you had.
Yeah.
That was your remote control. So I wonder how far, because we were saying before how quick technology is coming on.
Yeah.
How quick will it be? So our kids or our grandkids, great-kids, will be saying, we only had 4 PlayStations when we were growing up. Something like that.
Given what we said about the pace of change, and I think this is the most exciting thing, I bet we can't even imagine what the world of 20 years' time is going to look like. I mean, there's certain things that you can predict, like electric cars, but what excites me is the fact that there's going to be a whole load of stuff I'll predict now that we just can't see at the moment.
Hover cars. I want a hover car.
Oh, could you imagine? Can you imagine a time when actually travel isn't air travel, it's digital travel? It's like the thing that was it Star Trek or whatever, where you stood on something, you know, and you were teleported, if you like, you know.
Who knows? Who knows?
Who knows?
I mean,
things are beyond our imagination.
Well, I think the big thing is going to be AI.
AI, yes, definitely.
That's going to be the next thing. It's going to. I mean, you won't even know you're chatting to a machine. Honestly, they'll relate to you. There's that test, isn't there, to see if something's sentient or not. And you know, and I'm telling you, within the next 5-10 years or so, there will be, you know, you'll be having devices which you can engage with fully as though they're people, and they can interact with you and say, you know, gently nag you about, you know, doing that jog or not eating that donut or things like that. You know, it's not that far off, you know.
I think I've seen something where they're using those in certain residential homes as company for older people. And I can see there's some benefit there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But you just never know when you're talking to an internet. I want to know what happened to and this I think was in the 90s as well. Do you remember when virtual reality was it was going to be the big new thing, and you put on these headsets and you could go, what happened to that? Why did, and we even had a film, didn't we, with Michael Douglas, where it was going into a virtual office space and doing it. What's happened to that? Why have we not got games?
Well, because I think it defines itself. Some things is gadgetry and technology for its own sake, and that's fascinating. It's great to see what could be done. But if things fail to find a genuine need, they will disappear again. I mean, 3D comes around every so often, but no one actually wants it.
I mean, virtual reality is used. I mean, I know I used it. I mean, we did it in surgery, believe it or not. So if you're looking at, you put goggles on, you're looking at 3D aspects, so you could get a jaw in 3D, and then you could rotate it round and you could interact with it, and you could have a look at aspects of it. Where would you put an implant? I mean, for example, if you're looking at surgery, they use 3D rendering there as well. If you're going to, so it is being used, but it's used in very specific niches as opposed to entertainment.
Ah, right, okay.
Well, guys, I suspect we could probably talk for another hour on this. My sense of what we said is actually we're not afraid of it. We're quite embracing of what could be coming down the line.
Yeah,
it is the future.
It is exciting, and it's very. I love technology. I've been like my dad. I remember Dad buying the first Walkman, and that cost him something like near on £200, which when the Walkmans came out, it was a lot of money.
Yeah.
So he's always embraced new technology.
I didn't know your dad was Cliff Richard.
Yes, he was Cliff Richard. So I've sort of got my bug from him, and I passed it on to Maddie, my daughter, because she's all into new tech and everything like that. But it will be interesting to see what happens in the future. And I'm talking the future where you said, Phil, in 20 years' time, what could be? Are they just going to better what we've got in as much as fine tune it, or is there going to be some new big invention where people go, oh, wow? That's because
that's the exciting thing is, let's see.
Exactly. Let's see.
I mean, who would have thought we'd have been doing a chat like this? I mean, due to technology, we're doing this.
Yeah. Crazy.
Well, it seems a long time ago since I had an Atari. You remember those in the game console? I remember getting one for Christmas, and we'd never had anything like it in the house before. And we plugged it in, but we didn't, and we wondered why it wasn't working. And the TV wasn't showing anything, and we'd forgotten to put the aerial lead into the back of the TV. And I thought that Father Christmas had sent me a dodgy Atari computer system until somebody came along and plugged it in. We'd never had, we didn't have a video machine in the house. We never had anything. No. It's a long time since then, you know.
I'd like to leave you with this thought for those people out there who've got the all-new Singing or Dancing Xbox or the PlayStation 5. The first or the second real computer that we had was Commodore Sinclair, I think it was, where you actually had to put a tape into a machine to load the game.
Yes.
And it was an asteroid thing.
Commodore 64. Yeah.
But I remember you could copy the games because you could do a tape to tape and actually get a copy of the game. And it, because it was basically all based off sound, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, that's true. I used to have a ZX Spectrum and used to load your game via the tape recorder, and the lead was so dodgy. And if everyone coughed or moved, we had to start all over again.
Yes,
so you had to hold the lead, and no one even breathed.
Yeah, you couldn't say, right, we'll start from where we left off. No. You could go for an hour, it could drop. You have to do it all again. And for those people who are young people out there who are listening to this radio version of Loose Women, tapes are a format of plastic that you could record music onto and games.
Yeah, goodness. Commodore 64, ZX, Sinclair ZX, was it? And
ZX Spectrum.
ZX Spectrum. Oh my God. And the BBC micros, you remember those?
Yes. Oh, yes. We had those at school.
They were supercomputers.
Yeah.
I don't remember those.
Yeah. Right. Well, look,
I'm off to play Pong.
on your Binatone system.
Yes. It's great, isn't it?
I'm about to put a record on the record player, I think.
Hey, they're making a comeback. Record players are making a comeback.
Yeah.
Stick the needle on the record.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm going to get an old-fashioned book out, not a Kindle.
Yes, because although Kindle is nice and easy, you know, it's easy to.
It is, I've got one for holidays and things.
Just make sure it's Paul's.
Yeah.
Yes, of course.
All right, guys. Until next time.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone. Look
Take care,
after
everyone.
Sign me
Bye.
up.
Bye.